On 10th April 1919, there was a protest at the residence of the Deputy Commissioner of Amritsar demanding the release of the Satyagrahis Satyapal and Saifuddin Kichliu. A military picket shot at the crowd, killing several innocent protesters. The incensed protesters would not sit quiet. Banks, government buildings, including the town hall and the railway station, were set afire. 5 Europeans were killed, 8 to 20 Indians were killed in this. On 13th April 1919, the day of Baisakhi, a crowd of non-violent protesters, along with Baisakhi pilgrims, had gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh garden in Amritsar. Amritsar at that time continued to be in Punjab. They had gathered to protest the arrest of the two leaders despite a curfew which had been recently declared. On General Dyer's order, the army opened fire on an unarmed, defenseless public for 10 minutes, massacring about 1,000 people or more, till Dyer's ammunition ran out. The ineffective inquiry and the initial accolades for Dyer by the House of Lords fueled widespread anger. Dyer became a celebrated hero in Britain among most of the people connected with the British Raj. For example, the House of Lords, but unpopular in the House of Commons that voted against Dyer twice. A million Indians and laborers served in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, while both the Indian administration and the princes sent large supplies of food, money, and ammunition. In the rioting on April 11th, Marcella Sherwood was one of the victims and was almost beaten to death. After visiting Sherwood on 19th April, Dyer issued an order requiring every Indian man using that street to crawl its length on his hands and knees. Dyer later explained it to a British inspector. Some Indians crawl face downwards in front of their gods. I wanted them to know that a British woman is as sacred as a Hindu god and therefore they have to crawl in front of her too. Dyer also authorized the indiscriminate public whipping of locals who came within lathi length of British policemen. Railway lines were cut, telegraph posts were destroyed, government buildings were burnt, and 3 Europeans were murdered. By 13th April, the British government had decided to put most of Punjab under martial law. The legislation restricted a number of civil liberties, including that of freedom of assembly, gatherings of more than 4 people were banned, and so on. Dyer, without warning the crowd to disperse, blocked the main exits of the Jallianwala Bagh. He explained later that this act was not to disperse the meeting but to punish the Indians for their disobedience. Many people died in stampedes at the narrow gates or by jumping into the solitary well inside the compound to escape the shooting. A plaque placed at the site after independence states that 120 bodies were removed from the well. The wounded could not be moved from where they had fallen in the night as a curfew was declared. Many more died during the night. The casualty number quoted by the Congress was more than 1,500, with approximately 1,000 being killed. Rabindranath Tagore gave up his knighthood for this. He said, I wish to stand shorn of all special distinctions by the side of my countrymen who, for their so-called insignificance, are liable to suffer degradation not fit for human beings. On 19 November, Dyer was called to appear before the commission. Although his military superiors had suggested that he be represented by legal counsel at the enquiry, Dyer refused this suggestion and appeared alone. Initially questioned by Hunter, Dyer stated that he had come to know about the meeting at the Jallianwala Bagh at 12:40 that day, but he did not attempt to prevent it. He stated that he had gone to the Bagh with the deliberate intention of opening fire if he found a crowd assembled there. Patterson says Dyer explained his sense of humor to the Hunter Commission by saying, I think it quite possible that I could have dispersed the crowd without firing, but they would have come back again and laughed, and I would have made what I consider a fool of myself. Dyer clearly admits that he had opened fire on purpose. In his words, to teach the local crowd a lesson. Dyer further reiterated his belief that the crowd in the Bagh was one of the rebels who were trying to isolate my forces and cut me off from other supplies. Therefore, I considered it my duty to fire on them and fire well. After Mr. Justice Rankin had questioned Dyer, Chimanlal Setalvad followed, asking Dyer if, supposing the passage was sufficient to allow the armored cars to go in, would you have opened fire with your machine guns? Dyer says, I think probably yes. Sheetalvad continues, in that case, the casualties would have been much higher. Dyer responds saying yes. Dyer further stated that his intentions had been to strike terror throughout Punjab and in doing so reduce the moral stature of the rebels. Dyer wanted to send a message. Dyer said that he did not stop the shooting when the crowds began to disperse because he thought it was his duty to keep shooting until not just that the crowd dispersed and a little shooting would not do any good. In fact, he continued the shooting till his ammunition almost ran out. Dyer stated that he did not make any effort to tend to the wounded after the shooting. Certainly not. It was not my job. Hospitals were open and they could have gone there. But what is missing from the statement is that a curfew was placed and the wounded could not be moved to the hospital. The Hunter Commission did not impose any penal or disciplinary action against Dyer's actions because they were cordoned off by various superiors. However, Dyer was finally found guilty of a mistaken notion of duty and relieved of his command on 23rd March. Dyer died in 1927. Dwyer, one of the proponents of this massacre, was killed in March 1940 by one of the victims called Uddam Singh, who was wounded badly in this massacre. Churchill, on 8 July 1920, urged the House of Commons to punish Dyer. Churchill succeeded in persuading the House to forcibly retire Dyer, but Churchill would have preferred to see the general disciplined. In February 2013, David Cameron became the first serving British Prime Minister to visit the site. He lay breathe at the memorial and described the Amritsar massacre as a deeply shameful event in British history, one that Winston Churchill rightly described at that time as monstrous. We must never forget what happened here, and we must ensure that the UK stands up for the right of peaceful protests. Cameron did not deliver an official apology, neither did Elizabeth II at that time.